Welcome, Reanimated fans, and Happy New Year to all of you. We are here with another Reanimated episode to do a recap of a couple of episodes of season 9 of The Walking Dead. Are we season 9 or 10?
Yeah, it's 9.
It's 9 still, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But we're doing reviews of Chokepoint and Scars. But before we get to that, we are going to jump into some news items. I am here, as always, with my intrepid co-host, Stuart Tiffin. Hello, Stuart.
Hey.
How are you doing this new year? Are you new?
I feel refreshed, renewed,
Sweet.
etc.
I saw you did some. Did you do snowboarding or?
I did.
It looked awesome. It looked
against
awesome.
all medical advice, I got back on a snowboard after too many years have passed.
Ooh.
Also, fun fact, also not fun, snowboarding is not nearly as popular as it was when I was last doing it.
No, it's
at
not.
least not at this place where I was. Apparently, it peaked in 2010
Yep.
and has never really recovered.
That is
true. And it was pretty much, it felt 50-50 almost,
Ooh.
or at least that it was going that way. Not even close. It's like 10% of people on the mountain are snowboarders now. But I just introduced 2 more in the form of my children. So.
And they seem to be doing pretty awesome. So
Yeah,
hey.
bringing it back.
How did you do? Did you fall, or were you aching all over in places you never knew existed?
I fell once. It was a bad day. It was raining.
Yeah.
I don't even remember snowboarding or skiing in the rain in my ute. So it was kind of shitty. I did not last the whole day. Let's just put it that way.
I had a very, very chill New Year's in general. Did a lot of rowing, did a lot of eating. Hopefully the two balanced each other out. I don't know. But it was like a pretty cool staycation, which I desperately needed. So not looking forward to getting back to work, but probably about time to do that. But anyway, all right. Do you wanna kick off our news items?
Yeah, sure. We got some good stuff coming up. Number 1, there's a trailer that dropped for Blood Quantum, which is the new film, upcoming film, rather, starring Michael Grey Eyes. Mm-hmm. And it is significant because it's the first, maybe the only ever, all First Nations production. So, so producers, directors, writers, many of the actors, I think they had to bring in some non-First Nation folks to be zombies because one of the story elements is that Native Americans cannot get the zombie virus in this film, and so they are all that's left. Or at least, I think that's the way it's going to play out. Either way, it looks really cool. You should check out this trailer. It's on YouTube. But
Yep.
Do they have a release date in here? I've kind of blanked on
I did
that.
not see a release date yet, but I'm assuming it's going to be coming out fairly soon.
It'll be 2020. Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
I'm wondering if they're going to shop it around to different festivals before maybe seeing, like, kind of doing that route, which a lot of, it feels like maybe that's what they're doing.
Well, at the end of the trailer, it just says in theaters 2020. So, yeah, they might be seeing what kind of distribution they can get.
Right. And based upon the title and a couple of potential tidbits in the trailer, I'm imagining that because there's one character that basically says that they're immune to whatever virus this is. But Blood Quantum do you know what it is?
Oh, it's some colonial nastiness, isn't it?
So basically, it was to measure sort of the amount of Native American blood you had. And I would imagine that the play on this is somewhat related to how immune you are if you are more or less Native American. So
Yeah.
We'll see what happens there. Let's see
And
if
that
I'm
phenomenon
right.
of people who are like 5% Native American owning
Yeah.
casinos and stuff.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
So we shall see. We shall see if I am correct on this prediction. But I will say the trailer looks cool. I'm really excited to see this. So we'll keep everybody posted, but we will definitely be reviewing this one when it comes out. Next up, we have been talking about this for a while, but now it is confirmed that basically we're going to have almost year-round Walking Dead or in the Walking Dead universe shows for 42 weeks out of the year. So
Possibly.
I mean, it seems like it's likely, though, I would say.
Well,
So-
the only way that it doesn't turn out that way is if they have 2 of the shows overlapping or one
true.
leading into the next one, which there are precedents for that with like sitcoms, right?
There are, and sometimes they cut seasons short for whatever reason. They've definitely fit certain seasons into different things. But regardless, I think there's still going to be a high number of of more weeks than not with Walking Dead universe shows on there. So that's kind of cool.
Reanimated might have to start doing episodes twice a week just to try and stay on top of it.
To try to keep up. And then also within this article, the New World is coming out. Looks like March of 2020 is kind of what they said. It was spring of 2020. So we'll
I think
keep an eye on that.
basically right after the Prime show ends, they'll probably start the new one. It's gonna be tight. I don't know how they're gonna fit Fear the Walking Dead in there too. So we'll see.
And in real world contagion news, in addition to the plague stuff that was going on in China, there's a new respiratory illness that they have been talking about. They are so concerned about this that they've actually been putting measures for travelers and other folks in different nations because they're so worried about it, specifically in Hong Kong and I think also in the Philippines, doing like temperature checks and things like that. It is a respiratory SARS-like illness, though apparently it has been confirmed that it is not SARS. But the concerning thing is that it seems to have a fairly high mortality rate. Yay. And so more news on that. Let's hope that they've got it contained. But I just, the fact that they're putting these measures into place so quickly gives me a bit of a concern about how serious the situation is, because the fact that we're hearing about it means that it's probably been hanging out there for a little while. But hopefully they've got it contained and the measures are working. Any thoughts on that, Stuart? I'm just glad I wasn't traveling there, but
yeah, I mean, what else can you do? Just stay out of those kind of areas. That's not good advice. Sometimes you can't.
No. But anyway, we'll see how this unfolds. Let's hopefully it doesn't. But it's really it's so serious that they at this point they're only noting that 44 individuals have been noted to have this, but it feels like it's probably got to be a few more for them to be taking such drastic measures. So stay tuned.
Happy 2020.
Yes, but in happier news, very much happier news, the Kingdom, the next round, had a bunch of, I wouldn't quite call them trailers. They're like teasers, I guess. It feels more like Netflix put them out. There's 5 of them. Some of them are only a couple seconds long, but really excited to get back into that world. It looks pretty cool, as always.
These are also, you can't find these on Netflix's YouTube channel. These are like Korean language. These are hard to find. I found them through an Asian news website. So this is not really for the English language audience, but maybe also we never saw what viewership was like, even though Reanimated thought this show was the best thing since sliced bread. Not really sure. There's a cool little animated graphic on the Netflix YouTube channel right now that shows what people were watching the most last year. And it was basically Stranger Things, season 3, The Witcher, a few other shows. Nothing that's really going to surprise you, and they only show the top 10. But Kingdom was not among them, sadly. So, there.
Well, I still hope we get to see it when it comes out. So hopefully that will happen.
We will. If I have to go to Seoul, I will watch Kingdom on Netflix.
So without further ado, you ready to jump into the recaps?
Yeah, man. Let's do that.
All right, let's kick it off. So first up, and it's been a couple weeks, so just as a reminder, when last we left our ragged band of, I don't know what you would call them. They're an amalgamation of different people. So we've got Daryl, Connie going after the Whisperers, basically, because Henry has gone after Lydia. So they have basically invaded their camp and grabbed Henry and Lydia out of the clutches of the Whisperers. And that is where we start off with Chokepoint. This is directed by Liesl Tommy and written by Eddie Guzelian and David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick. So, not shockingly, Daryl is a little skeptical of Lydia and doesn't really want to take her with him. I'm not totally shocked by that, but I am a little bit, because part of why I thought he was going after her was because of the abuse and all that stuff. So
Well, he was going after Henry.
I know, but still, it's, and of course Henry's not going to leave without Lydia. And there's this weird moment where Henry's like, "Come on, Lydia, you and I can go off on our own." Like that's going to work. I don't know.
Well, the thing is, Daryl's not wrong in this scenario.
No.
And neither are the other people. They're like, yeah, she needs our help. But the chances are she would have been fine as a whisperer. And because, I'm speaking with the benefit of having watched the whole season. But that raid and what happens in this episode basically kick off the things that end this season. And so Daryl is absolutely right. So that's kind of interesting that he is... Well, he's not sympathetic in his righteousness, right? Because what he's saying is abandon this young teenage girl and all of the bonds that she has, these hormonal bonds that she's forged with Henry. But yeah, he's not wrong, and so it's kind of interesting conflict that they've managed to sow that is made more interesting on the second watch of this episode, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. And then we've got Connie along, and she does provide a counterbalance to Daryl's knee-jerk reactions.
What an interesting duo they make, huh? And it's kind of like commented on by Yumiko and Magna or whoever, or Kelly. They're like, oh, don't worry, Connie's going to be fine. She's with Daryl. And they're like, Daryl's going to be fine. He's with Connie. And they totally follow through with that, I feel like, in this episode.
They definitely do. And I do like the back and forth. And Daryl can be really stubborn, but he does listen to her. So he's not totally, I don't want to say deaf, but that's kind of deaf to her logic. Because basically Connie is of the mind that, look, this person has no friends, and her response is like, yeah, we have friends that can die, but this person is alone in the world and we need to help her.
That's not really true, right?
Well,
I mean, probably it is. I doubt that she has friends among the Whisperers or any of these people friends, but she has a group, and she talks about how they've taken care of her whole life. So
yeah, and I do think that a little bit of this episode, which it does show successfully, is that they have their own weird little way of going about the world.
Yes,
it's
at the beginning of the episode, right? Like where the guy's dying and Beta is super nice to him.
Yeah, and Beta is basically like, okay, you're dying, get his wife because he's going to go through the change, and then basically says to the guy, you're going to walk with the Guardians now with us, and you'll always be with us. That lasts for about 10 minutes.
Very sweet. Yeah, it doesn't last super long, but it was very sweet sentiment. And you could see when Ryan Hurst looks down at the guy with a Daryl crossbow bolt sticking out of his head, he's like, you son of a...
It's like, now it's on. But it does. I did like how they showed it without being like kind of over the top, that they basically have their own culture, they have their own belief system, and so you do feel slightly conflicted, and you can understand why Lydia feels conflicted about killing them, because that's basically their plan, is that they're gonna go up into this tower, create a choke point, and take out the Whisperers. And her thing is like, they're just gonna they don't need to send a bunch of people, they have Beta, and Daryl's like, well, I'm going to take care of him, no problem.
Fine,
I can take care of that pirate guy. He's like nothing for me. They definitely sort of stir up the animosity between those two with him killing the recently turned Whisperer. And so...
this whole set piece in the apartment building is hot. Like, it's just good.
It's really good.
It's made better by all these little details they throw in. Like, Connie is like, oh, yeah, I have a stash here. Yep. So she knows the lay of the land. She knows where the blueprint is. They come up with a good plan. There's like a scene of Lydia and Henry trying to make out, and Daryl standing there, doesn't let it happen.
Nope, he's
like,
such a
come on, Uncle
blocker. It's like, dude,
hey,
can't even let him have a kiss, man. But
not even a little. But then they get to smile goofily at each other. Like, I just love this episode, honestly. All these interactions between Lydia and Henry, Connie and Daryl.
They're great, but also the choreography and the fight choreography, like I just love the fact that, like, when Beta comes through the door, he's got the door ready because he knows Daryl's gonna have his crossbow, and then they both, Daryl and Beta, like just kind of like burst through walls. Like, it's just, they really
mostly Beta.
Mostly
Clearly,
beta, but I just like how especially the first time it happens. It's like he's like, I'm just gonna go through this wall, no problem. And
well,
then
luckily they only have half the drywall up and no
true.
insulation or anything inside. Like I don't know how he knew that going into the wall, but apparently he could just he was like, oh, this is just one layer of drywall.
Yeah. Also, the just sort of the. It's always scary when you have a construction site set up with you've got those like layers of plastic. There's a pretty like crazy like Daryl takes out one of the Whisperers like through the plastic with an axe, and it's
Oh
all the
God.
more all like like it really is a ridiculous but pretty awesome
This is
set piece.
definitely a showcase for Daryl being a lethal weapon, and not that like this is new, but yeah, the Whisperers basically look impotent compared with him,
Right.
right? Henry and Connie have a bit of a harder time, but they're still taking down. I think they take down 2 Whisperers with no problem until they get into an actual fight,
Right. And then
and then Dog has to come in and save Henry's ass.
well, you knew that was going to happen at some point.
Yeah.
And it does show that Lydia, who had basically been, and look, Daryl puts her into a safe spot, puts her in there with Dog, basically has her in there because she has said, look, I don't know if I can kill my own people. And he's not like really judging, but he doesn't want her like in the way. So that's why he puts her in there. But I'm sure he's also worried that she's going to turn on them. So that's probably another reason. But that said, she hears the fight going on. She kind of changes her mind, and she does pick sides, at least in this particular instance. And when she sees that Henry has been hurt, it's believable that she feels bad about it. And you can tell she's totally broken because she's still asking him, like, why he's helping her. And he's like, because I care about you. And so, look, she's lived in an abusive situation all of her life. The person that is supposed to be caring for her and giving her the most love, it's not that she doesn't care for her, but it's a bit of a twisted way of caring about her, and it's a pretty negative and dysfunctional family thing she's got going on. So this is kind of new to her, and I would say she is touched by it, but also slightly suspicious of it. So
So you're undermining my argument that she would have been fine as a Whisperer for the rest of her life, and that this war didn't have to happen.
I think that's part of the urgency to get her out of it, because she clearly doesn't really. She's now. Maybe she would have been fine had she not seen that there were other possibilities.
Yeah.
But she has, and that has caused doubts. And so I just don't think she would have lasted as long with them, even if they hadn't come to rescue her and gotten her away. I don't think she would have been long for this world.
Where are you on season 10?
I am nowhere on season 10.
You didn't take advantage of the winter break.
Well, I will tell you. So my better half is away for a day, so I'm probably going to dive into it today.
Okay.
As you know,
happy birthday belatedly to Bill.
He has a hard time watching these, so I have to take my moment. So that's part
catch
of my
up,
plan for today, honestly. So I'm excited about it.
I would like you to hold in your head this concept of like the antidote for Whisperers, or the vaccine, is just showing them a functioning community.
It seems a little too easy, I know. But anyway, but like so we've got that whole thing going on. Then like, so this is a whole big part of the story. And
that's one big part. The other big part is the Highwayman subplot,
right.
Which again I love.
I love it too.
When it happened, I went up on Twitter and I was like, "This is great. It's so cheesy," but I feel like the show needed like some victories, and not everybody agrees. Some people I think thought it was way too cheesy the way that the story was settled,
right.
But these kingdom people just got through. I mean, it was 5 years ago in the chronology, but they got through the war with the saviors. They lost
a lot of people,
dozens of people. Like another combat with another group is not what they needed.
Well, and I also think that especially on the heels of the stuff that's been happening with the Whisperers, if there's any sort of level of ability to negotiate, that should be the first step, because what are you going to do? Start war and have all this going on again? Nobody wants that, and there's so few resources.
So once they get through the face-to-face in the warehouse, and Carol of all unlikely people is the one who like seals the negotiation with movies. The leader of the Highwaymen, they kind of cut out of that scene and cut right into them charging down the road to help Tara, and it's awesome. And the leader of the Highwaymen is an Australian actor named Angus Sampson. He plays this guy Ozzy. it's not going to be a long trip for Ozzy on this show,
No, it
but
doesn't
it's
feel like
it feels so good, man. And I
Well,
was so on board with this.
part of why I thought that Carol was a little bit more willing to chat with them is because maybe there's a slight amount of guilt, because part of the reason why they were able to come in was because Jed's group, who we all know she torched,
Yeah.
like
Oh, it's true.
basically had moved out of it. And there's this moment where they're talking about it and they were like, oh, maybe it's Jed's group. And she's like, it's not Jed's group.
Nah.
But doesn't give any more information. But I think that maybe is a little bit of what she's thinking, is that she doesn't want to start yet another set of hostility with like another group. But
I mean, they clearly are completely outmatched by the Kingdom people.
yeah.
In that scene in the warehouse, they're just like done. And I wonder if they did kill the 2 guards outside, like they were talking about doing, before they came inside to do negotiations.
I don't think they
wonder-
did. I think they probably just immobilized them.
It would have
or
been hard to
something.
come back from that, right? I mean,
Yeah,
But that was what they were talking about before they went in for
Right.
the talks. So curious.
Well, and then the other thing is that the Highwaymen clearly have a lot of goods to trade, and they're now given a platform where they can trade them. So
Yeah.
there's that too. And I think even if she hadn't done the movies, though, that was kind of funny. I did like that was such a commodity that they would be like, oh, really? And I thought I liked it. I liked it the first time. I liked it this time. It adds a little bit of like lightheartedness to the season. It lightens it up a little bit. So
Yeah,
and you
it's
need
the
it.
equivalent of the supermarket scene,
Yeah.
but with still with some violence on the line. You're not sure exactly why they're trudging down the street.
Right.
Tara plays it really well.
Supermarket respites are my fave. You know that.
There's also a cool little detail in this episode with they have the baby in the back of the wagon with Tara's hilltop caravan. Mm-hmm. And the woman, Tammy, I think her name is, puts it inside that chest with holes in it at one point.
Yep, and locks the little baby in, and you're like, oh, that poor little dude.
Poor little thing, but still cool. Like,
Yep,
at least they
good
thought this
idea.
out, right? And I just watched A Quiet Place over the last week, and there's a similar sort of conceit in that film, which I don't know. Have you seen that?
Yes, but there's also a. Did you see the trailer for the second?
I did, yes.
I'm sort of.
Are there babies featured in the second part?
It's now I think just kids, but like that's what I was thinking about. I'm like, ooh.
That's what prompted me to watch the first one. I was like, I've never seen the first one. Now there's a sequel coming. I better get on this and watch the first. It was pretty good.
And I actually realized, and I had realized it before, but the woman who plays Tammy is actually, she was on she was a stand-up comic for a while, Brett Butler.
Yeah,
And
she's a known entity.
Yeah, but it didn't click. I think I realized it the first time I was watching the season, and then it just reminded me, and I'm like, oh wait, who is this woman again? And then I'm like, oh, it's her, and it's sort of I'm just glad to see that she's out there still acting. It's kind of cool.
Rhett Butler. Are you sure it's Rhett Butler?
Brett Butler.
Brett. Because Rhett Butler's a dude.
No. Brett Butler she was in a show called Grace Under Fire.
Yeah, okay.
But like in the late 90s, I think. But then she was also like, she did a lot of stand-up comedy and stuff like that. Anyway.
Anywho.
But moving on. But yeah, we got her and her blacksmith husband, and it is a kind of nice thing because they lost their kid, and it seems like they're at least finding some solace in putting their affection here with this kid, and that baby is darn cute.
Yeah, TV babies.
Yep.
So at the end of the apartment building fight, Beta gets knocked down a stairwell. I feel like Daryl really should have, if he wasn't that far down.
It's not a stairwell.
2
It's
floors?
an elevator shaft.
Well, that's what I meant. Sorry. Yeah, it's an elevator shaft. He gets knocked down onto the top of the elevator, and I guess it's like 20 feet.
Yeah, I feel like Daryl would have checked, but maybe it was dark down there, and he was he thought it was further down than it was.
Just spits on him and then goes on with his day.
Yep.
And it's quite disappointing. I mean, it would have been too easy to knock out Beta after one big fight. But anyway, they had a really good fight. Beta's knives were much larger than Daryl's, but they
were.
It was good.
Actually,
man.
one of my favorite parts though is when Daryl hides in the floor.
Yeah.
It's just like suddenly he's in the floor, and you're like, "Ah, Daryl, you're back." It's great.
I mean, what I've been kind of thinking about also after seeing some of these episodes. This is like episode 13 of this season.
Mm-hmm.
This was so Rick Grimes is gone
Mm-hmm.
as of the mid-season finale, right?
Yep.
And what we're left with was supposed to be not Daryl Dixon, Norman Reedus as the new lead for the show.
Yep.
But really, it's been Michonne. It's
Yep.
been
Totally her.
Denai Guerrera. So it's kind of interesting that like there is no new Rick version of Rick on in this ensemble. It's been shared between Daryl, Carol, I would say too, and Michonne. So it's been kind of interesting. But in this sequence and in this part of this story, Daryl is definitely leader material, and he's like a super badass, which he's always been, but he's a super badass in a leading man sort of way. So I was maybe watching it for that with that lens, but it was also interesting and gratifying to see that get played out that way.
Yep.
So I guess that's kind of the end of this episode, unless there's anything else from this one you want to mention.
Nope, not from this one.
It's just a damn good episode.
But I did thoroughly enjoy it in the second watching, almost as much as the first watching. And yeah, this was definitely a satisfying episode.
And on to episode 14, Scars. This, under a different showrunner, might have felt like a filler episode.
But it didn't.
And my take is that it does not. It feels like needed exposition.
Yep.
To talk about the scars that they've shown on Daryl and Michonne, and to explain why Michonne has been so weird and moody since the mid-season premiere. So awesome, you know what I mean though, because it's a flashback and it introduces a whole side story. It could totally have been like, oh, great, now we got to go and deal with Eastman and in Morgan's mission to learn Taekwondo or whatever.
Yeah, but I feel like in this case it does give you a lot of exposition, but gives you a foundation for moving forward, and it's successful in that. So I don't feel like it's a filler episode, though it easily could have been. I thought it was artfully done, and definitely the flashbacks were interspliced like in such a way that it was. I loved this episode. I thought it was put together very well. And this is directed by Millicent Shelton and written by Corey Reed and Vivian C.
And so interesting to point out also, these two episodes directed by ladies, which is not always the case on this show.
Right.
And so 2 good episodes. This one also introduces a guest star in the Rutina Wesley, I think is her last name.
She was in True Blood, I think is probably what most people know her from. I really love her as an actor. I wish she was in more. But when I saw her in this, I was very excited to see her. But spoilers, also not a long-lived storyline here, obviously.
It's a one and done, but she does a great job.
Well. She does it well.
An unbelievable element of this story is that she and Michonne knew each other like in college, maybe. They haven't seen each other in 15 years, but we know we're like 6 years into the apocalypse, so it had been a while even before everything went down since they had seen one another. But it's a little bit far-fetched that they lived in Georgia, I assume, or we assume, right? Michonne was from Georgia?
Yeah.
And now they're in Virginia, and they've run into each other. A little bit hard to believe.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah, a little bit hard to believe, but not entirely. I mean, I guess it happens every once in a while, and they haven't done this very much on the show, so I'll give it to them. And I think that they had to have some connection because Michonne is not the most trusting of people, so there had to be a reason why she's going to let these people into the community. And as it happens, it's her friend Jocelyn who's supposedly injured. Though they are welcoming, they know that they need help. It's Jocelyn and a couple of kids. And so they let them into Alexandria to help treat Jocelyn's wounds. And, Jocelyn freaks out, and it turns out she is the leader of a merry band of children survivors. And so...
Children in quotes. I mean,
they're very... I mean, they don't hide the fact that the kids are just very capable of survival. They hunt for the community, at least here. And Michonne, she and Jocelyn talk about some of the old times, and it's shown that they've known each other like way back. Although Michonne gives a little bit more exposition on that later. So it's at first you think it's just like college friends, but later it's she says to Daryl that she's known her, like they've been through some stuff together. So
Right.
it's you believe it, you believe the bond between them.
And also
And
that Jocelyn is the only person on The Walking Dead who calls Michonne Mish.
yep.
So you're like, oh, she's a Mish. Okay.
Yep. And so it's sort of like they bring them into the community, and they get their hands bitten for it, basically, and
Yep.
they
The
wake
parallel
up.
story is interesting in this case too, because they flash back and forth between these two storylines, and in the present day, it's Daryl, Lydia, Henry, and Connie being let in, and then
Yep.
and their story continues too. But both of these groups of people who are let in have serious consequences for Alexandria, for
Right.
Michonne.
Right. So in this case, basically, Michonne opens up her heart. It's her old friend. Judith is friendly with the kids. Judith and some of the other kids. You see them all playing together with the kids from Jocelyn's group. There's like truly like a campfire scene where they're playing like a game, and you can kind of see this, and it all goes to hell in a handbasket. Michonne and some of the Alexandrians wake up one day and everybody's gone. One of their guards is killed, or one of their people who was guarding probably the storage, the supplies, is dead, and a lot of the food is taken, plus medical supplies. And Judith and a couple of the other Alexandrian kids are gone. So of course, and Michonne, I should mention, is super pregnant at this point. She is by no means helpless. She's been out looking for Rick, or looking for Walker Rick. Daryl has been too. We've seen
Her
this.
pregnancy is super helpful visual ID to let you know
Yep,
which
the
timeline
time.
you're in, also, which is
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, it is nice.
like that.
But I mean, she's still able to dispatch things. She is moving a little slower and a little bit more awkward, but she's definitely still lethal. And basically, Michonne and Daryl are tracking down the kids with Jocelyn. And
Yeah,
this
this
is
part,
like,
I would like to raise just one quick quibble with. So they go from they realize that the children have been stolen after the sleepover, that the guy has been killed, that their storage has been rifled through, and then the kids have gone out through the manhole, which now has a nice lock on it in the present day. I enjoyed that parallel.
Yeah,
also.
that was nice.
But then, so they kind of cut from, oh no, the kids are gone and they went out through the manhole, to Michonne and Daryl are out in the woods looking for the kids alone. And I'm
Right.
like, all right, there were at least 5 or 6 other parents who came to find their kids at this sleepover.
Right.
They weren't also gonna insist on coming along. I think that they would have.
Maybe they would,
And
but
how
we
did
don't.
Daryl show up? Daryl was off in the woods last time we saw him, just being alone and being happy about it, right?
Well,
So-
she sent up the Daryl bat signal, probably.
Yes, exactly. They set up some sort of moody biker signal into the clouds, and he showed up. So that's my only quibble, is just that all of a sudden they're together and alone, and it's like, all right, 9 months pregnant Michonne. Daryl makes sense, but send Scott, Kenrick Green,
Yeah, I agree.
Sonequa Martin Green's husband. He's capable now. He's been a modern day Alexandrian for 6 years. I'm sure he can take care of things.
Well, and also
So-
that if your kids are missing, they're with this group of people, I think it'd be really hard to get people not to come. So
Yeah, that
that's-
too. And they also have a couple of scenes with Frankie, the red-headed former wife of Negan from the Sanctuary. She gets a couple of little scenes and a couple of little lines as one of the other adoptive parents in this episode, setting up for events that are going to happen later on. Because otherwise you're like, who the hell was this person?
Yep.
It's been a while since we've seen Frankie in any kind of context. But yeah, so I just thought that was a little weird. But then they kind of just, I don't know if Daryl is actively tracking them.
It
I
seems
assume
like he is, and then they end up in I don't know what it's like, some weird little building,
Like a school?
like a school,
It's got
which seems
playground.
fitting. And it is like a super horrific scene because this is her friend, but also the kids are basically feral at this point. My bone of contention with this is that I don't think the kids could hide how weird they are.
Yeah,
Do you
because
know
they
what
can
I mean?
pretend to
'Cause
be completely normal.
I don't think that the kids could have enough artifice to
Yeah.
not seem like little sociopaths when they're in the community. So that was because the level of creepiness that they're showing in
And
these scenes
duplicity.
is so high.
Yeah.
I also don't really believe that the Alexandrian kids are that dumb, and I don't think they would play along with it if Daryl and Michonne are coming after them. So those are my two little bones of contention. That said, like this scene totally makes sense if you're talking about Michonne's mistrust of outsiders, about her protection of the Alexandrians, and the fact that it was her friend that basically did this. I think she feels like this all makes sense at this point. It fills in a lot of puzzle pieces, so that makes sense. But my thing is like these guys go from like clearly stuff has happened with Jocelyn, but is it really necessary to trust Daryl and Michonne up and brand them? Like, what is like? Was their ultimate plan to kill them? It wasn't clear to me here what they
Mark
were.
your kill, claim your kill. I don't know. Yeah, it's not 100% clear. Other than she's teaching her children. Jocelyn is teaching the children to be unthinking,
Yeah.
or following orders and not be taken down by morality and sentiment. So yeah, not totally clear.
Right. And then this sets up. I mean, I feel like you've got to have a horrific scene like this to get Michonne to the point, and also to show how they don't have any boundaries, because you got to believe that one of Jocelyn's kids is going to go kill the Alexandrian kid. So that's kind of
Right.
where we
That
are.
is the ultimate drama tension on the line. But we know that Judith doesn't die, so in a way, this is defanged. So they make it as terrible as possible,
Right. And it's
for
pretty
us to
terrible.
think. And it's pretty terrible. And one of the good things that this episode doesn't do is it doesn't force her into early labor,
Nope.
or make her
I
miscarry.
thought they were.
Even though,
When I first watched this episode, I'm like, oh no, are they really going to do this? And
Yeah.
they didn't, so I was very happy about that. But I was waiting for that too.
but that's such a TV trope.
Yep.
Like, oh, I've been mildly disturbed by something, or like in Grey's Anatomy, I fell down one stair.
Yep.
I'm gonna go. My baby's in distress. They don't even mess with that. They're like,
Nope.
RJ's fine. He got sliced by a knife, and he's just fine.
Just fine. So's Michonne.
And she gets hit by a 2x4 and branded and
Yep.
all kinds of terrible things, and she's okay. Everything's
Yep.
fine. So I kind of like the fact that they didn't mess with the pregnancy. They were just like, all these terrible things are going to happen, really just to make it seem like Judith's life was in danger, even though we know she's fine in the
Right.
future.
And
So it works.
part of why they're splicing these in is because basically Michonne doesn't think that Judith remembers any of this and has not told her, and doesn't think that Judith understands why she's kind of keeping the Alexandrians separate. And Judith, in like sort of present day time, has disappeared. And she, like, it's interesting because Michonne goes to Negan to demand to see if he knows where she is, which is an interesting thing because it's clear that she knows that Judith has been talking to him, but apparently does not know what they talk about or how much.
Yeah.
And Negan
Curious.
actually, this is an interesting exchange because Michonne accuses Negan of being manipulative and duplicitous and saying like, oh, you're not going to tell her who you really are, when in fact Negan has told her all the horrible things he has done. And that's almost more horrifying, but then Michonne's like, okay, well, I guess I have to give you that. like,
But he also admits that he can't really lie to Judith because
Right.
she can smell through it. And he's actually very complimentary. He's like, she's too much like her ass kicker of a mom to deal with any of my BS. So it's honestly one of the most like sympathetic scenes of Negan I think we've even seen in a while.
well, yeah, and also Negan can be a jerk, but you're right, like he's complimenting her, but also complimenting Judith. And I also think that it comes through that he does care about Judith genuinely.
Yeah.
And despite himself, sort of cares about Michonne. So, because he definitely cared about Carl. And so there's that whole interesting connection there. And it is the kick in the pants that Michonne needs to like kind of be like, okay, and I'm gonna go and find Judith and tell her what happened and all this other stuff, which leads up to the ending scene between these two. Whereas it turns out Judith has known all the time what happened. She remembers it all. And she just thinks things should be different. So Michonne thought that Judith just didn't know or wasn't remembering and was defying, just sort of defying the Alexandrian isolationist thing just because she was naive maybe, but she did remember it all and still wants to be like Carl and Rick. So that's like kind of an interesting thing. Um,
In this final scene in the field,
yeah.
Michonne rides out, finds Judith's bike somehow. I'm not sure how all this tracking happens, but
Yeah,
finds
but
her
you know,
bike
it's the magical tracking thing that happens.
and then is having the this flashback of the final fight with the children, quote unquote children, really just little demons, while she's hacking her way through a mob of a horde, really, of zombies that Judith is in the middle of. And I'm wondering, would Judith have survived all of these zombies if she had been left all alone?
Probably not.
I don't think so, especially since she gets grabbed by one at the
At the
last
very
second.
end. And then calls for mommy, which is interesting.
It's cute. If such things can be
But
cute.
there is a nice little understanding, and they wrap this up between the two of them. There's definitely a lot more trust and honesty between the two of them, which is a good thing. And I liked it. I really liked how this whole episode evolved. And we haven't yet talked about the other side of this episode,
The other side.
which is we find out a little bit more. So at the end of the previous episode, Daryl says that he will go off in order to basically avoid a war between the Whisperers and the different communities and put the communities in danger. He basically tells Henry and Lydia that he'll go off, like he'll go with them wherever they want to go. That there's a big world out there, but in the meantime, they're gonna go. They feel like they got to make sure that people know what's happening before they do that. So they go to Alexandria to treat Henry's wound, and
And then they're heading to the kingdom.
right. And this is in some ways how all this sort of gets brought back for Michonne, was because they show up at her gate. And this is sort of how the whole, you know, the flashbacks happen. And Michonne has a moment with Lydia where she basically tries to convince Lydia to go off by herself in order to save everybody else, that would be the right thing to do because it wouldn't put anybody in danger.
Yeah, clearly kind of a dick move,
Yeah.
and this is before her moral, awakening,
Right.
thanks to Judith. So,
Right.
But yeah, she's trying to persuade a teenager to just go off and be by herself in the zombie apocalypse. Like,
teenagers
come
with
on.
hormones and all sorts of things. He's got a cool scar now, you know. And they kind of go off while they are making their way to the kingdom, while Michonne is in search of Judith. And then there's a nice sort of little wrap up at the end of the episode where Judith and Michonne are in this like weird convertible ride being pulled by horses.
Yeah, so they've clearly gone all the way back to Alexandria, got their sled or their converted caravan van, and they're going to the kingdom.
Yep.
They intercept the walkers. In this case, Daryl, Connie, Lydia, and Henry. I guess they're probably not walking too fast since he's got a hole in his leg still.
Yep.
And get him on board, and then we get another cut to a couple of whisperers right outside the kingdom. They've found the gates to the kingdom. Things are going to be bad now, and people are all arriving for the fair. We must tell Alpha. Didn't really like the way that line was delivered.
No.
Sometimes the whisperers really don't whisper. I'd prefer it if they
No.
would whisper more.
They just kind of like grunt or be like, yeah, it definitely wasn't.
She was like, "Oh, now we should tell Alpha." But they do. She does sound like a crazy cult person, which is, I guess, kind of the MO for the whisperers too. They are crazy cult people.
Yeah.
But that's these two episodes, and I think they were two solid, really good episodes. Like I said, this one really could have felt like filler, but it totally avoids that pitfall because it stays in the present and it also explains what's happened in the past. And the one before this had that amazing fight scene in the building and the introduction of the Highwaymen. So between these two, I'm just like riding high on a wave
Yeah,
for
no,
season 9.
these were both excellent episodes, and I just, both of them were enjoyable. And then also I forgot to mention, because one of the things that happens, we see, because they've talked about it before, how Daryl and Michonne have been searching for Rick, and Daryl does at one point say he's never going to stop looking for him.
But he also says he's not out here and that he's followed the river all the way to the ocean and
he
back.
says that, but I think he's saying that so that she'll stop looking, because he doesn't want her out there, because he's worried about her. But
And she's pregnant as heck, yeah.
But it feels like that's continued. So it was a nice little loop into the comment he made, or the comments that were made earlier in the season. But I liked everything about these two episodes. I thought they were solid, and I know that there was definitely some criticism about the Kingdom Highwayman thing, but I liked that addition. I thought it was like a great little piece to put in, so it just isn't so dark.
Yeah, you need some wins. You have to have some.
Yeah. So, anyway, I'm looking forward to talking about the next couple with you. So, do you want to wrap up?
Yeah, sure. So, one last thing to say real quick.
Sorry.
The Kingdom, and I talking about like points of light and points of darkness. The Kingdom has been fairly regularly a light point in this narrative. Especially this season with the movie Lightbulb mission, basically a light point for the show with the soundtrack, and they're all nodding their heads, etc. And then this with the Highwaymen, it's like they're really buoying up the Kingdom before these last 2 episodes of the season, and so I guess
be prepared.
Buyer beware,
Well, and I was actually thinking that too, because it's even just sort of the people walking around, and not just the Kingdom, but Alexandria too, just seeing what they've built there, and like you can just see different. Like there's this scene between Michonne and Judith where they're sitting, and there's like. You see the water, that like you see the crops, and you've got both places seem like little pieces of heaven compared to the rest of this world.
Life's not so bad.
So yeah, I was, because they were showing so many of these scenes, when I initially watched this, I was like, oh, brace yourself.
Yeah,
and
this
I
episode
wasn't
also
wrong.
starts. The episode also starts with, even though it's the scene of Michonne looking for Rick's corpse, it's like lighthearted acoustic guitar music.
Yep.
I'm like, wait, what? Okay, this is Walking Dead. Sure.
Yep. So
Anyway, so yes, good episodes. We'll come back and finish up the season next time. So thank you for following along. You can get our show notes at reanimatedpodcast.com. You can email us at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. You can get us on Twitter at reanimatedpcast. And thank you for listening.
yeah, thanks so much. Ciao.